All right, Bob Chick, we're here in Miami at the 2015 National Championships. I'm here with David Bay and, of course, Peter McGuff in the house once again. And another great show. Almost 1,000 athletes here in attendance. Big show, man.
Yeah, it was a good show. I mean, a good turnout. I don't know that it was quite as competitive as last year's Nationals or the USA's, but some really good class winners. And I think there'll be some really solid additions to the IFBB coming out of this show.
Well, that's been kind of the theme of the week, Peter, as we've been here, is that the Nationals, it's not that deep, it's not as good competition. You got to kind of look at the obvious on this. It's the last pro qualifying show of the year. So obviously we've had the USA, you've had the juniors, both junior shows, you've had the North Americans. I mean, there's been 4 or 5 opportunities to turn pro. So just by laws of attrition, it's probably not going to be the deepest here at the Nationals.
No, and I mean, I always think, we have the 2-day event, the Friday and the Saturday. The guys always, in the main, show up better on Saturday when they've had a chance to sort of see what they're like and get feedback from various people, and then they can tighten up or fill out whatever they do. But it was an interesting show. Each class had its own little tale to it, so it was interesting to watch.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of which, David, let's gun down the line here of the some of the overall winners of the respective divisions, and then of course we'll get right into the men's.
Yeah, if we're taking a look at some of the women's and men's physique, bikini, Alyssa Jeremoth out of the C class, she looked fantastic. Women's physique division, we had Stacia Woods also out of the C class. Figure, Tamika Irvin, our D class winner, she took the figure overall, looked fantastic. In our men's physique, we had Raymond Edmonds, our F class winner, guy's only been competing about a year, looked absolutely fantastic, took the overall. So, aside from the bodybuilding classes, definitely some good competition here. I think one of the girls that won bikini was like 19, one of the figure winners was 19, as well as some really good pros, also some young pros coming out of nationals here.
Peter, what'd you think of the women's classes? Of course, your favorite bikini, women's physique, of course, fitness. We had them all here.
Yeah, we did indeed. And this isn't any aspersion on the bikini competitors, but when there's 50 going in front of you, especially when you get to my age, it's a bit hard going. In terms of, it's like when you get a box of chocolates, there's 50 chocolates in there, you might have 10 of them. You're not going to have the 50. Maybe I should retract that. Talk to David.
We'll talk to David on that one. Let's get into the life is like truly a box of chocolates with bikini chicks.
Every once in a while at these bikini shows, you have somebody who really, really jumps out at you. We get the question all the time,
Sure.
How do you judge this? How do you judge this? And when you've been to enough shows, you can kind of get a feel for who's good. But, there wasn't anybody who really, really jumped out. I remember 2 years ago, Janet Leyeug walked out on stage, or Leyeug.
Yeah.
And it was over, and that says a lot for bikini. And no disrespect to the bikini girls, but a lot of these girls do look the same. When you're trying to pick descriptive terms, small waist,
Right.
Curvy, whatever. That was a year where somebody walked out, shut the door on everybody in 2 seconds. Didn't quite have that this year, but again, some really good competitors and, big numbers as always.
Well, let's get right to the meat of the order, Dave. We had, starting things off with your bantamweight, of course, right up through. Let's get at least the winners out here before we get to the meat of the order.
Yeah, bantamweight winner, Ron Paramore, younger guy. He's only been competing a little over a year, looked really good. Our lightweight winner, Jose Fortuna, leanest guy in the entire show.
Yep.
He was formerly competing as a welterweight, works with Don Long. He was a little taken back when Don told him he wanted him to drop to lightweight, but obviously a good game plan, and he was absolutely shredded. It was unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And then moving forward, our welterweight class winner, Theodore Adkins. This is a kid with really good structure. He is incredibly put together, full muscle bellies, no weak body parts. John Durante, we've seen him at the national level for a while. Probably the craziest quad sweep you're ever going to see on somebody, not named Dennis Wolf or whatever, or Bob Chick.
Hey.
And Bob for his quad sweep. But no, so there was some quality, not a ton of depth. At the USA is the middleweight, middleweights went like 9 or 10 deep with really, really good middleweights. But definitely some good winners. Speaking of middleweights, David Robinson, Peter and I had talked about him when he came out. David Robinson looked absolutely incredible. And there were some people thinking, despite him giving up as much size as he did, that he could have been a contender in the overall. He was, he looks like a guy who's ready to jump into the 212 and do some damage. So.
Well, getting into the light heavies. Now, we had some lighting issues yesterday. The lights actually went out to the big bank of lights. So the side lights were the only thing that was visible to the judges. So they actually rejudged the light heavies live tonight, Peter.
Yeah, I mean that was something different, and they really did judge it as well. They didn't rush through it. You know, they really went to town on it, and eventually Nicholas Medici came out on top. You know, he had good shape to him.
I didn't see that one coming. I got to be honest.
No,
I had actually number 105. Had the teal trunks out there.
Mike Tyler.
He was good. I mean, it was ripped up, especially from behind, hard. I thought he kind of had an easy victory. He ends up in third.
Yeah, well, I had it for Jermaine Todd, certainly last night. And then I think tonight he might have been a bit softer and Medici might have been pushed ahead of him. But, you know, it was competitive because we got three choices there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and at least they got a good look. I mean, you know, of all things, David, they at least want to make sure these guys got a fair shake. Obviously, photos weren't going to be too good from the prejudging. And, you know, there's business as well as the business of bodybuilding to be had. So at least the judges and head judge Steve Weinberger, and they got the A1 crew here. They got everybody's here at the national championships. So that's obviously how the light heavies turned out. Moving into the heavyweights, decent competition, not as deep as I was hoping.
Yeah, no, depth was an issue in the heavyweights, but I think you probably could have stacked a whole lot of depth here, and your first place winner probably still would have been your first place winner. Charles Griffin got third at the USA's behind Cody Montgomery and Gerald Williams, both guys who are now pros, your USA and your North Americans winners. And you know, there were some people who had Charles ahead of ahead of both of them actually at the USA's. I mean, here's a guy who's a very complete bodybuilder. He's only been on stage for a couple of years. He did some show back in like 2003. Took like 10 years off, and I mean he doesn't have any weak body parts. He's got big legs. His rear double bicep shot, I thought, as far as talking about the overall, shows being one from the back. I thought he had most of those guys in his back shots, especially his rear double bicep. Big arms. I mean, he's not missing anything. He weighed in right around 217. He's a little bit tall to drop down to 212. He talked about maybe doing that. I think his weaknesses, if there are any, would be exposed going up against guys who are similar weights, but 4 or 5 inches shorter. Sure. But he's a guy who can put on maybe 10, 15 pounds and I think do really well in the IFBB.
Well, moving into the supers now, this was the talk of pretty much the weekend, Peter, and we knew it was going to come down between two guys who were pretty much talked about as the two pre-contest favorites, Eddie Bracamontes and, of course, Sergio Oliva Jr., and it did come down to these two guys. And I tell you what, it looked tight at the prejudging yesterday.
Yeah, it was very tight. Two different bodies. Bracamonte was very hard, very vascular. Sergio was in great condition, especially compared to the US. He really made improvements. The hams were in and everything. And I even felt last night that it was just Sergio's way because he was a bit round, a bit fuller, filled more space, and when they stood next to each other and did certain shots, Sergio was so much bigger, most muscular, double biceps. But it could, different judging panel, it could have gone a different way, yeah. So it was, Jonathan
Ward,
Irizarry, who was in third. I mean, he was pretty, but that was a good little, not a good little physique, but a good physique, very compact, everything was there, and the top three were very good.
Very good, yeah. Speaking of, but
and there's another guy, David, maybe you want to bring him up in the super heavyweights, who was fifth. Oldacre, Rashid Oldacre.
Yeah, you guys are going to see pictures and maybe some video of this guy. Rashid Oldacre, they say he weighed in at 275. Now, this guy looks like he's legitimately from a size and a structure standpoint, not just a size standpoint, from a structure standpoint, he looks like he's ready to be on an Olympia stage. You see this guy, when he came out Friday, we were like, oh, that's an Olympia contender guest posing. And, we were like, he's just not in shape, but size-wise at 270, no weak body parts. Everything was huge. It was one of those things where you're kind of blown away that you're seeing this guy on an NPC stage, but he just wasn't in the kind of shape he needed to be in. And then he came back tonight, and this is probably one of the biggest 24-hour turnarounds I think I've ever seen. We've been at hundreds of shows, and a lot of them, some of the IFBB shows are 2-day shows, and been at plenty of NPC national level shows where it's a 2-day thing, and I honestly, he looked like a completely different person. Not one of these things, hey, he dried out, he filled out. I mean, he just looked like a different person. His hams were in, his glutes were in. The people who were in the audience here tonight that weren't at prejudging yesterday showed a lot of displeasure for being in fifth place. Really the only booing you heard all night, but they weren't here yesterday. And he was not a first, second, or third place bodybuilder yesterday. He shows up the way he did yesterday, in top 5, there's going to be some mix-ups.
Yeah, well, and that's interesting. And just to clarify, Peter, as we both know, in the NPC, even though the judges do reserve to right to judge at night, and sometimes they do. I mean, we've seen places move a whole lot. It's not going to move a lot. I mean, the prejudging is the show. That's where they're getting compared. And this guy was noticeably off, obviously, for the prejudging. Yeah, he looked like a world beater here tonight. This guy looked like a pro out there. But interesting, if he shows up like this at the prejudging, where do you put him?
Well, we might be having a different talk about an overall champ, to be honest. That's how good he was. I mean, there was no weak body parts there. It was obvious last night, wow, this guy is built. He's too heavy Friday night, but if he ever gets in shape, look out. And then 24 hours later, he's in shape. So, like David said, I've not seen one as dramatic as that overnight, ever. Because it wasn't just sharpening up. He must have lost some weight because he was really heavy.
And that could have been notable. I mean, when you're that big, I mean, it would not be unlikely for him to drop 12 pounds. I mean, it's all relative, you know what I mean? So, big guy like that. I'll tell you what, I'd be looking around for this guy for the USA coming up this next year because I don't see anybody beating him.
Oh, God, no. I think he turns pro at the USA or whatever. He's got to dial it in. I mean, he's got to dial it in the day of the show. There's nobody in the NPC that's touching this guy. Nobody. I mean, we've been to all the NPC shows. He shows up in shape. It's over. And then he can go to any pro show 2 weeks later, and unless he's running into a Phil Heath or a Kai Green, I think it's over there as well. I mean, he's that good.
Yeah, he is that good. Getting into the overall, now I didn't really see this as a big battle, except for the middleweight. I actually thought the middleweight gave the biggest challenge to Sergio.
Yeah, I heard some people saying that the middleweight was second in judging for the overall. Structurally, he was just so complete. I mean, your heavyweight Charles Griffin was good. Light heavyweight Nick, not structurally in the same ballpark as David Robinson, but yeah, I mean, it's tough for middleweights, to go against those guys. They're giving up, 50, 60 pounds sometimes. When you put Sergio next to David, it was just too much size-wise. But from a structure standpoint, aesthetics, conditioning, he was as good as anybody else in the show.
Peter, let's talk about Sergio now into the IFBB pro ranks. Obviously, we don't know what show he's going to debut at yet. He's got some time to kind of soak this in, go be the national champ. Hopefully, we'll see him on a stage next year. I should say the next season that's coming up. What are the things he's got to work on in order to make any kind of a dent in the pros?
I think he's got to improve his posing. He's got to polish that up and hit those mandatories quicker and get into them and stay into them. I mean, he's on the right track as far as development goes. I mean, he's had a steady. This is a guy who started off at 18, 140 pounds, 6 foot. First competition 10 years ago was 176 pound middleweight. So he's come through the ranks. I mean, he's what now? 31? Yeah, he's 31. So he's still relatively young for a pro, even though we've got some other youngsters somewhere else. I can't explain to you, unless you've got half an hour, how big a step this is for him inside his head. That he's lived with this. He wanted to be a bodybuilder, follow his father. His father didn't encourage it in any shape or form. In fact, was quite, deflected him from it, stopped him training for a time. And, now he's a pro in his own right. And he did it because, he's got good genetics from his father, but it's hard work that got him that pro card, not his name. And that's what we've got to remember now as he goes forward. I think he'll be good for the pro lineups. I mean, he's got a great personality. He's very outgoing. He's great with the fans. I'll be interested to see whether this gives him a really big boost and he kickstarts into another level of development. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Sergio Oliva Jr., following in his father's footsteps, now into the IFBB pro ranks. I think he's going to make a great pro, David. Hopefully we'll see him on stage this coming year. I like to see a guy that actually gets his pro card and then actually uses it within the next calendar year. So we'll wish him the best. David, closing thoughts?
Man, just from a nostalgic, sentimental standpoint, cool to see another Sergio Oliva.
Yeah, sure.
And he earned it, like Peter said. I mean, there's some people who are going to say, it's his name. No, he earned it. At the end of the day, I think you could have flipped the coin between him and Eddie. Still would have gotten a pro card here this weekend. But, somebody who's a long-time bodybuilding fan, it's pretty hard to deny that that's a cool thing to see come out of this show.
All right. Well, guys, appreciate the wrap up here at the National Championships 2015 is going to come to a close. That's going to wrap things up for a great year also, guys. Congratulations to Team MD. Great job this year on all the coverage of all the shows, but that's going to put that one into the books. Peter, closing thoughts.
Yeah, just the 900 people in this show. David sat through the whole of the prejudging, the whole of the finals. I didn't. I can't. So, I mean, a lot goes into us bringing this sort of coverage. Steve Blackman funds it and allows us to do it. David does a great job. Adina, yourself, who am I forgetting here? Dan Solomon. It's a team effort, and there's a lot of work involved. I think kudos to the team and David particularly for, hanging in there as long as he did.
You did good, kid. You might have a future in this business.
All right.
All right, that's going to wrap stuff up here for Peter and for David. I'm Bob Chick, wrapping things up here for MD Online.